Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to use the idea of a giant iceberg to completely dive beneath the surface of a deeply complex issue, gender-based violence. You know how an iceberg hides almost all of its mass underwater? Well, it's the exact same thing here. The visible acts of violence we see every day, that's literally just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface are these massive hidden systems of inequality driving the whole thing. We're going to map out those hidden drivers and then evaluate exactly how society is trying to fight back.
Okay, let's quickly map out our journey for today. 1. Defining gender-based violence. 2. The roots of unequal power. 3. Trauma and societal impact. 4. Strategies to combat GBV. And finally, 5. Evaluating the progress made. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Defining gender-based violence, symptoms in society.
To really grasp the whole iceberg, we have to start right above the waterline. In South Africa, a staggering 21% of women over the age of 18 have experienced physical violence by a partner. Now take a second to really process that. That's more than 1 in 5. And what's absolutely crucial to remember here is that this number only represents the reported cases. Countless other instances go completely under the radar because victims fear the perpetrator or, frankly, they've had terrible experiences with the police. What we're actually looking at is a violent pandemic.
So what exactly is it? Well, gender-based violence, or GBV, is an umbrella term. And the main takeaway here is that this violence isn't random. It happens because of normative role expectations and highly unequal power relationships between genders. It primarily targets women and adolescent girls, and that's entirely due to their lower socioeconomic status and this deeply ingrained societal belief that they just aren't equal to men and boys.
Now, it's actually incredibly revealing to look at how the South African legal framework, specifically the Domestic Violence Act of 1998, expands our view of this. It shows us that abuse is way more than just physical harm like hitting or kicking. The law explicitly recognizes insidious, completely hidden tactics. We're talking about economic abuse, literally depriving a family of their basic needs, and emotional or psychological abuse like constant belittling and shaming. These aren't just bad behaviors. They are calculated methods to assert absolute dominance within the home.
Section 2. The roots of unequal power, systemic imbalances.
Okay, let's sink below the surface now. If the physical acts of violence are just the tip of the iceberg, what are the hidden cultural currents actually driving them? Down in the deep water, we find patriarchy. This is a cultural system of male dominance. It essentially creates a rigid hierarchy where men are expected to maintain power and control over women in literally all situations, from the living room to the boardroom. This built-in imbalance sets the perfect stage for abuse.
And the wild thing is how early this starts. The absurdity of gender socialization kicks in before kids even turn 6. Just look at the messages we're sending. Boys are taught that aggression is totally natural, that they're natural leaders, and they need to take risks to prove their manhood. Meanwhile, girls, they're actively encouraged to be obedient, submissive, and to just leave the major decisions to the men. These are not biological facts, folks. They are deeply learned ideas that create a highly dangerous, totally artificial imbalance.
So when a society views male aggression as natural and female obedience as required, violence stops being just an emotional outburst. It becomes an intentional tool. It's the direct, calculated abuse of power used to reestablish control whenever a woman or girl tries to assert her basic rights or independence. It's the system protecting itself.
Section 3. Trauma and societal impact. Ripple effects of GBV.
Having established those hidden root causes, we really need to zoom out and see the multi-layered damage this iceberg causes. The trauma here is incredibly complex. You have the physical trauma, which leaves visible bodily harm and significantly drives the HIV and STI pandemic, but we absolutely cannot ignore the psychological and emotional trauma. These are the invisible wounds. They shatter a person's mental stability, causing deep fear, PTSD, profound shame, and a complete loss of self-worth that can literally last a lifetime.
And the ripple effects? They are catastrophic. GBV is absolutely not just a private behind-closed-doors issue. As you break it down, you see it tears families apart and creates deep economic deprivation. In society, it normalizes aggression. Kids grow up thinking force is just how the world works. And at a systemic level, it places an unbelievable, unsustainable burden on our healthcare facilities and leaves the courts completely overcrowded. It damages the entire social fabric.
Section 4. Strategies to combat GBV. Dismantling power.
Knowing all of this, how is society actually trying to melt this iceberg? Well, the first step is early intervention. Since these stereotypes form so young, we have to intervene in early learning environments. The goal is to teach assertive communication so kids can recognize power dynamics and reject submissive roles right from the start. Some schools are even empowering learners to form safety teams, where they map out unsafe spaces in their neighborhoods and build problem trees to tackle the roots of violence before it ever escalates.
Then, on a macro level, you have national responses. Take the 16 Days of Activism campaign. It uses mass media to loudly reframe GBV not as a private squabble, but as a severe human rights violation. In the classroom, there's comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE, using scripted plans to teach consent and core values. And for direct, immediate support, you have places like Thuthuzela Care Centers. These are incredible 24-hour hubs that provide medical, legal, and psychological help, all under one roof to minimize secondary trauma for survivors.
Section 5. Evaluating the progress made. Are we succeeding? So we have these campaigns, but we need to be real for a second and look at the data. Are they actually working? When you impartially break it down, it's a harsh reality. Awareness campaigns get a ton of high visibility and social media likes, but they often fail to change those deep-seated patriarchal attitudes or stop extreme violence like femicide. Education programs like CSE build great long-term understanding, but a major gap is that teachers often lack the specialized training to deliver them properly. And those amazing care centers, they are frequently undermined by incredibly slow justice systems, under-resourced courts, and the massive distances victims have to travel just to reach them.
It can really be summed up by this massive gap in policy implementation. South Africa has some genuinely progressive laws on paper, but because of patriarchy, gender hierarchies are firmly maintained despite all these efforts. The fact that underreporting is so high and perpetrators are so rarely held accountable tells us something pretty chilling. Unequal power relationships are still operating at a massive, systemic state level. Patriarchy is stubbornly resilient.
Which brings us to the ultimate question we have to grapple with. If gender-based violence is just the visible symptom of a deeply learned systemic hierarchy of dominance, what will it actually take to dismantle the patriarchy in practice? With the laws already on the books, what concrete, systemic actions must we take in our homes, our schools, and our courts to finally melt this iceberg of unequal power for good? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the surface, and I'll catch you next time.